Indigenous rights in urban spaces is an important topic that has gained more attention in recent years. Indigenous peoples have a long history of living in urban spaces, but in many cases, their rights have been denied and their presence overlooked. This article will explore the issues that Indigenous people face in urban spaces and the steps that are needed to ensure that their rights are protected. First, it is important to understand the history of Indigenous urbanization. Indigenous peoples have been living and working in urban areas for centuries, and many of their cultural practices are intimately connected to urban life. However, their rights have often been denied or ignored by municipal governments and urban planners. As cities have become more diverse, Indigenous rights in urban spaces have been increasingly recognized as important. Second, it is important to recognize the barriers that Indigenous people face in urban spaces. These include racism, discrimination, and poverty, as well as lack of access to basic services such as healthcare, education, and employment. Indigenous people are often excluded from decision-making processes and their voices are not heard in urban planning. Third, it is important to understand the need for Indigenous rights in urban spaces. Indigenous people bring a unique perspective to urban planning and can help to create a more equitable and inclusive city. They can also help to ensure that urban planning is based on an understanding of traditional Indigenous knowledge and values. Fourth, it is important to recognize the initiatives that have been taken to ensure Indigenous rights in urban spaces. These include the creation of Indigenous-focused urban planning initiatives, such as the Urban Indigenous Peoples Planning Process, UIPP. In Canada, this process uses a collaborative approach to urban planning that takes into account the needs of Indigenous communities. Other initiatives include the development of Indigenous-run organizations, such as the Urban Aboriginal Peoples Advisory Committee in Toronto, which works to ensure that Indigenous voices are heard in the city. Finally, it is important to recognize the importance of public education and awareness. This is key to ensuring that Indigenous rights in urban spaces are respected and protected. There is a need for more public education and awareness about the history of Indigenous people in cities and their ongoing struggles. This is an important step in ensuring that Indigenous rights in urban spaces are respected and protected. In conclusion, Indigenous rights in urban spaces is an important issue that needs to be addressed. Indigenous peoples have a long history of living in urban areas, and their rights must be respected and protected. This article has outlined some of the issues that Indigenous people face in urban spaces, as well as initiatives that have been taken to ensure their rights. It is important that public education and awareness about Indigenous rights in urban spaces is increased, and that action is taken to ensure that Indigenous voices are heard in urban planning.